Hello, my name is Jamie J. I'm the CEO and founder of Bottleneck Distant Assistance. We're the world's first dedicated distant assistant company. And this is Live with Bottleneck, but we're not talking about my company today. We're talking to Hunter Thurman about Alpha Diver and his company, where he's going to help you stop the bottleneck in your business. So as soon as we get this amazing introduction done, we call him Magic Mike. We tease him a little bit, but he is a magician when it comes to graphics. So I'm proud to present this and just give him a little credit there because he does some amazing things. So we'll be right back in 38 seconds. Hello, my name is Jamie J. I'm the CEO and founder of Bottleneck Distant Assistance and host of Live with Bottleneck, where we help you stop the bottleneck in your business. We're really excited today because we're going to be talking with Hunter Thurman. And I was introduced to Hunter by a good friend of mine, Bob Goodwin. If you have a chance, go check out his new site, career.club, where he's helping people find positions transferring after they've been working with in the corporate world. He's an amazing person. Go check him out. Lots of fun there. So without any further ado, I'm going to kind of jump right into this today because I know time is very important to you. This is going to be an incredible conversation. If you're watching this live on either YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, and you have a question for Hunter or a comment, please, by all means, go ahead and ask away in the comment section there on whichever medium you're watching this on. I understand if you're a little nervous about putting yourself out there. That's fine. If later when you're watching this or you're watching this in a replay and you have a question, just type it into the comments and I'll do my best to forward those questions off to Hunter so that he can answer your questions for you. So Hunter Thurman is the president of Alpha Diver. We're going to be talking about creating a model-based culture. And why, oh why, can Hunter help you stop the bottleneck in your business? Well, let me show you. Hunter is a strategic advisor, a Wall Street influencer, author, and one of the insights industry's biggest advocates and critics. He founded Alpha Diver in 2011 to bring the model-based world of neuroscience to bear on the world of consumer and shopper science in order to better reveal why people actually behave in the ways they do. This is critical. Hunter's team at Alpha Diver is comprised of unique minds from the worlds of neuroscience, strategy, and human empathy. They help brands grow through insights and strategy via applied neuroscience. His clients include top global brands in the world of food, beverage, pharmaceuticals, financial services, and beyond. So without any further ado, please allow me to introduce you to Mr. Hunter Thurman. How are you, sir?
Hey, Jamie. Great. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm fantastic. I'm really pumped. I think this is going to be an incredible conversation. One of those things that just seems to escape us all the time is figuring out why. And then once we figure out why, how do we share that with people so that we can satisfy their why, knowing that they're getting into something that's going to take care of the why. And I wonder, before we kind of get into that conversation, and this is truly going to be a back and forth conversation today, I don't have any pointed questions, it's just going to be a conversational type of dialogue. Wonder if maybe you can tell us a little bit more about you, your background, and maybe what you're up to now.
Sure, absolutely. I'll give you my background and kind of what we do here, which segues then into some topics that I think everyone will be interested in their day-to-day business and how some of these principles about understanding why people do what they do can apply to an organization and apply to a workflow and a team. But my kind of origin story, so I've been in the insights and strategy industry for over 20 years, which means we help companies, often big companies, figure out, as you said, why people do what they do and how to solve problems. Sometimes, consumers don't even realize they have. And so kind of the old-fashioned way of market research and trying to diagnose why why people do what they do is to go out and observe them and ask them why they do what they do. But, you stop any psychologist on the street or even just probably in your own experience, recognize that we as humans are very bad at explaining our own behavior. There's lots of things in our cognitive processes that get in the way of that. And so, as you said, in 2011, I became in my bio, one of the biggest advocates and critics. I became very dissatisfied with asking people why they do what they do and trying to figure it out, and really discovered this world of neuroscience and the scientists that administer it, and started working with them. And the very first lesson really that they taught me, and one of my key partners here, his name is T. Siggy Hale, PhD. At the time, he was at UCLA, and I was sort of talking to him about that insight or that struggle, and he said, "Well, you're working model free, and you should be working model based." And I kind of said, "Oh, do tell." And he said, "What?" Right. In academia, model free means, essentially what I described. You go out in the world, observe it, and then kind of come back to the ranch and try to build the model, try to describe what you just observed, what you saw, what you heard. And it can be very frustrating because it's sort of like traveling without a map. Model-based research, I learned, decade ago, and have been applying since, is when you take an established model, a known quantity, and then go out to the world and map back to it. So rather than going out and saying, why do people do what they do? So for instance, if you were saying, how do people experience a meal? And you just went out and observed it, that would be model free. If you said, look, we're going to go out and assess how someone experiences a restaurant or a meal using the 5 senses, that would be your model. You'd be doing it in a model-based way. You'd say, what does it look like? Obviously taste like, sound like, smell like. You would have a means by which to go out and study a context, study an environment in a much more confident way. And so in our work, we've developed our model, which at its core identifies these 4 drivers that explain all human behavior. So when someone is behaving or navigating a space in their life, one of these 4 drivers will be the means by which they're making decisions. And it's all based on the things that happen subconsciously in our behavior, the things that we don't necessarily recognize. And by using that model, we can go out and study people much more accurately and understand behavior much more accurately, which obviously is very empowering in our projects for our clients in describing to them why people are doing what they're doing and what their struggles are. And then what we can transition into talking about is how we've applied that lens on our own work and how it's applied in our culture and the way we do our work, sort of shining the light on ourselves. But I'll pause there before I go too much further, see what questions you have.
Yeah, so it begs the question, what are those 4 drivers?
I didn't even mean to give you a cliffhanger, but there it was. So there are these. So the 4 drivers range from very rational, which, we think that we are rational beings. We think that what we do makes sense and it's based on analysis of facts and figures. Sometimes that's the case, but just as often we're behaving based on what we call the tribal or social drivers. So the first one's sort of the rational, practical. That's the most conscious. That's the one we can recognize and sort of explain to ourselves. The other 3 we can't explain to ourselves as well. And then so the one I just start talking about is tribal or social. And that's basically using the wisdom of the tribe. And I'll give you an example of these in a second. The third one we call experiential. And that's where we're using our senses. We're using basically the feels. What does it feel like? What will it feel like if I do this behavior? And the last but not least is what we call the impulse or the instinct driver. It's the most subconscious. It's the most about social status, competition, sort of see, get. So, for example, one I often use is, we often do journey mapping work with our clients. They're saying, where are people consuming content? And it's like, you're not going to find people are going to some obscure website to understand, soft drinks. They're on Facebook, they're on Instagram, they're on YouTube, just like your audience here. Everybody's on the big mediums. That's what gets the eyeballs. What's important is not where they are, it's why they're there. So someone can log onto Facebook for any of those 4 reasons. They could go to learn and to get information, to investigate a good dog boarding, place that has good ratings and things. or they may be going on there to connect, to go and reconnect with people. That's sort of what ostensibly social media is meant to do, but it's only one of the 4 reasons someone could go, to connect with their tribe and maintain their standing as a member of a social tribe. They could be there to just have a little vacation, to just have an experience. That's when I, in the middle of the day, log into Facebook. It's just to what we call sometimes just kind of dive, just go in and wander around, follow your senses, and have more of a little mini vacation experience. Or they may be there for the 4th driver, to brag, to show off, to put a picture of their heli skiing trip that they want to make sure everybody's aware that they took. And so it's just sort of an everyday example that you can start to look at your own behavior. And you may go onto Facebook for all 4 of those or for one of them, but it sort of brings to light those 4 drivers in everyday behavior.
Well, thank you for explaining that, the 4 drivers. And now that you say that, it seems relatively obvious that these would be the 4 areas that someone would go somewhere. But just knowing what they are and having the wherewithal to introduce services, solutions, direction, and even getting started, it's really nice to know what these are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, so when we embark on our projects, I mean, that sort of starts to segue into the kind of the culture piece. Everyone on our team knows what our worldview is. They know, and we believe, based on mountains and mountains of data, neuroscience, and we see it in our own data, we know that these drivers are true and accurate. So when someone comes to us and says, why does a mom buy diapers? Why does someone enroll in an insurance program? Why do they buy Coke versus Pepsi? Any sort of domain, why do they shop at Target versus Walmart, et cetera, et cetera?
Why does someone hire a distant assistant?
That's right. That's exactly. And it's actually a really good point. One of those 4 drivers will be the reason. And it may be that everybody hires a distant assistant for the same reason. It may be that there are different reasons. But it's a really good point. I mean, I think ostensibly people say, well, it's practical and rational. It takes work off my plate. It reduces certain tasks. That's true. It also may be that they want to be a better member of their tribe. If you're a CEO and you want to spend more time on the value added things and the team building, your reason for wanting to bring in someone like you guys offer could be very tribal. It could be very experiential. Look, I want to stress out less. I want to spend less time on email. I want my day-to-day experience to be better. Or it could be that it's like, hey, you know what? Big shots have an assistant. And it's like, it actually, in preparing for this, I was like, yeah, that is kind of cool. Like, when you interact with someone and they say, well, my assistant will help you with that. You're like, look at you. So any of those 4 reasons are in play, and they span across domains. And so our team knows what to do, and that can be, I think, in any business, but certainly in our world, market research and strategy, why don't millennials shop at X, Y, or Z? You look at it as these daunting big questions. It gives you, as I said, like a map. Let's go look at it through these 4 lenses. And you're exactly right. Just knowing that there are 4, to me, gives an incredible amount of absolution in having a place to start. And that's in our project work, what we do, and it's an important part of our culture, our team knowing what we do, in their first step. And then as I said, we've looked at that in terms of our day-to-day workflow. And we can talk more about it. But when I find we're all really, really vibing and everything's going well, like is when we have a meeting and we all know which of those we're on. We have some meetings that are more in that rational, practical, what we call like a charger session. We're trying to get things done, move the ball down the field. Other meetings are more the experiential. We're trying to invent new things and, what would be conventionally called brainstorming or explore, kind of follow our nose, create new ideas. And when a couple people in the room are on one page and I'm usually the one that's in charger mode. When we're misaligned, that's when our interactions are not very effective and not very enjoyable. We get frustrated with each other. So one application in our daily work is, we'll literally in meetings go, okay, this is a charger meeting. Not that we don't like new crazy ideas, but that's not what we're doing today. Everybody get kind of shift into that first driver charger, where we're trying to move things along in a rational, tangible way. And when we're all on that same page, everybody everybody functions much more harmoniously and much more effectively. Likewise, as I said, if we're trying to create something new, we've been working on this big new database and tool that we're developing. There's a time and a place that we need to have these sessions where it's like, we don't have an objective from this meeting other than to expand our thinking. And when we do one of those and everybody's on that same page, it's really effective. So that's one example of how we're using it in our day-to-day work as what on ourselves, as well as out in our work, trying to help our clients.
That's really interesting. I've just gone through about 5 months of working with this ad agency, and it was really hard because of the amount of research that was involved, and keywords and copy and all of that actually came back from various split tests and things. And just so happens in these 4 different areas, I can now see how we align each one of those. Yep. And I'm wondering, do you actually, if you work with a client, do you actually maybe break down each of these different drivers with a different lens, and through that can help them not only with data, but with maybe some copy ideas, some messaging ideas?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that's what you find. And that's a really, it's really great hearing you say that, because anecdotes like that are so gratifying, and they're so demonstrative of the model that, like, look, you can go out and split test, and that's what most do. Split test, split test, split test. Then the process of natural selection will find you into those 4 buckets. And maybe one of them was more influential, for your audience than others, but they will end up in those 4 buckets. So that's exactly what we do. If you were starting a process where you were looking at, proposition or what we might call positioning statements, here are different ways of describing maybe your business. Rather than just go, hey, we've made up this range of them that we think is pretty comprehensive, you can use this model and go, okay, look, we have 3 or 4 of them that are very practical and rational. We have 3 or 4 that are very tribal. We have 3 or 4 that are very much about the experience. We hadn't thought of the one that helps people win and gives them social status. So now, by using the model, we've made sure that we covered the full gamut. So it's a double benefit, and that's something that, when you go into like the C-suite, you go into senior leaders, that's always their first question. They go, well, what'd you forget? What's missing? And with a model-based approach, you can go, nothing. It's sort of like the restaurant analogy. If you went to the CEO of Darden Restaurants and said, hey, we looked at the guest experience through the 5 senses, he or she is not going to go, well, what about the 6th? What about the 7th and 8th? They're going to go, oh, got it. You thought of everything because you used the model. That's what we're doing here, is saying, yes, you filled the 4 buckets. And then when they come back and the split test results happen as they do, you can say, look at this. All the ones that are in bucket 4, the win, the competitive, the status, those are the ones that are coming out on top. Now we not only know which statements in that example 1, we know why. And then you're really empowered to apply that to your strategy and write more like them, for example.
Yeah. I'm going to put something up on the screen. And in doing this, I would love for you to tell me which of those 4 drivers.
A pop quiz.
Yeah. Now, this is what happened. We split tested, I don't know, 600, 700 different ideas, concepts over the course of 3.5, 4 months.
Yeah.
And the one that just by far and away, we called 44 of them our gold coin winners. The 44 were, they got the most interaction and they just were killing it. And by far and away, this one was the one that led everything. And it blew my mind. I had no idea.
Interesting. And these were statements promoting Bottleneck.
Yeah. Yes. And the only reason I'm saying this, and I'm sorry to bring this into it, but I'm excited because we just kind of went through this.
Yeah.
And hopefully I can use this as a demonstration or, an example of something they might do. But this is it.
Here's how he gets so much more done. That's really cool. Yeah, so there's a couple components going on with that. I would say that one is it's that 4th bucket. It's the instinct.
Oh, you nailed it.
You sometimes call the alpha, because what it's starting to do is it's creating competition, and you're kind of going, hey, what is your excuse for not being like Elon Musk? A lot of us business leaders probably in our dark moments kind of go, shoot, like I'm successful, everything's going great, but dang. I mean, it introduces competition. It creates urgency, that 24-hour day, that brain state, and these are brain states, you're not one or the other. You shift between these four. We use all of these in our daily life. But that brain state of the most instinctive impulsive is very impatient. It doesn't know what it wants, but it wants it right now. And then here's how he gets so much more done. It's really throwing down the gauntlet and going, look, you too, and here's where it empowers, and it sounds like got some real traction for you. Here's how you too can achieve status, elevate, win, get more done, etc. And I would imagine the other ones, we could go through it all day and say, well, that one's more fun. It'd be very easy. It is always very easy. And if this happened to you, you're not at all alone to write the rational, practical ones. You can, studies say you can get 30% more done in a 24-hour day using a virtual assistant. It's like, it's not a bad claim. It's not a bad statement. It didn't hit the reason for your audience, or I guess your prospective audience, for engaging. So yeah, we have these things kind of color code. There's the blue, which is the practical, the green's the social, the purple is the experiential, and the red is the real alpha or instinctual. That's like pure red, that statement you just showed me.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned status earlier, because I think we did get a lot of comments like, yeah, but that's Elon Musk, and I said, well, he's delegating to a lot of really smart. Yeah, but that's Elon Musk. He has all it. And I said, I think you're missing the point here. Kind of, this is what I'm thinking in my head. Now we did get some of that, but the majority of it was like, yes, I want to be like that.
And what you're talking about there's some market segmentation. What it sounds like you found is that the majority of your market is in that red, that like, look, I want to compete, I want to win, I want to elevate my status, I want to be recognized for that. There's urgency to it. There may be another segment of business leader that's in your audience that doesn't subscribe to that's not, said more accurately, that in the context of running their business, that's not their primary driver. And that's okay. You may have found in your 40 gold coin winners that all four are represented, or that two of the drivers are represented. And when you peel them apart, you go, so there's really two mindsets out there. The one that's most pervasive is that red, that instinctual, more competitive one. And that's what we're going to deploy against. Or you say, look, we're going to deploy both, but we understand that they're addressing different audiences.
Yeah, it's really insightful. So I want to go back to earlier where I wanted to revisit this question. How do you apply these four drivers in your business?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. So I've mentioned a few ways. I mean, one is make sure everybody knows what to do, which sounds so obvious, but when a project initiates or a challenge comes in, or like we've had instances where we've got a team that we're working with, and some of the team members are like loving it, the interactions are super symbiotic and positive, and then other members of the team aren't on board, and are like, I don't get it, I don't think this is the right approach, whatever. Using the drivers, using the model to say, well, okay, let's do some empathy taking, with our team. Which of the drivers are they using? I mean, are the ones that are really excited about it, all about the experience and exploration and their game to try and go on new adventures, and those that aren't are concerned about how it's going to impact the broader team. They're more the social tribal and they're worried about the impact. Okay, well, usually you can get a pretty quick diagnostic by applying the model and say, okay, now I think I understand the difference between those that are really on board on the team and those that are skeptical. And now that I know, or at least have a strong hypothesis why they're skeptical, I can address them in a different way. I can talk about how we're going to share this out with the broader team. I can give you an example of another time where, the broader team all got on board and benefited from it. So it really helps us with perspective taking, or empathy taking, with our teams. I mentioned that, in a meeting, these drivers apply to a team interaction. Some meetings are all about, let's get this done. Sometimes we're doing like a happy hour, and that's just like, hey, we're not going to learn anything. We're not going to try to push some agenda. We're all just going to bond together, and that's an important piece of it. Sometimes we're, going off and thinking of crazy new thoughts. And sometimes we're really trying to compete. Sometimes we're going, look, here's what we're seeing out in the marketplace. Here's an opportunity. How can we most aggressively go after that? And we kind of go, hey, we're all going to be in red mode. We're all going to be in very, competitive mode for this interaction. And when we're all rowing in the same direction, the meetings go great. They're very productive because we know what the desired outcome, we know what the reason is for them. And then the last one I give you is in recruiting, in building our team. So these 4 drivers will shift throughout a given day. So, you get a bit of a sense for me
Just going to ask that. I was just going to ask that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you look at me here at work, and then you look at me on the weekend with like my kids. I have 4 pretty young kids. Then you look at me like on a guy's weekend with some of my college buddies. I'm not like Jekyll and Hyde. You'd recognize me, but different of those drivers are in play for me. And so I'm using different decision-making criteria, paying attention to different things, and behaving based on different factors, depending on my context. So you do shift throughout a given day. And sometimes even, you can see examples where people throughout their life stages will shift. I mean, there are phases in our life where we're very driven, very competitive, very alpha. There's other phases in our life where we're very tribal. We're not trying to stand out or gain status. We're actually just trying to facilitate social harmony, etc. But generally, each of us will have kind of a default state that devoid of context, which you're never devoid of context. You're always in some context, but we'll have one that's kind of our most familiar, most comfortable. So, my parents were both CPAs. The rational facts, figures, numbers came very naturally to them. Many of us, when it comes to tax time, that doesn't feel real natural. We shift into it. I mean, to do your tax return, you got to go into the blue. You've got to go into rational, practical dollars and cents, but it's more punitive. It's less comfortable. So we do have kind of a default state, and then in our lives we shift through them. So when we're building our team, and this is a big, we talk about this all the time. We're not in the HR business, but there is a really interesting case to be made that an optimal team will have all 4. And if you think about teams that are really effective, and there are variations of this with like the ANTJ Myers-Briggs kind of things. Those things where people do like, I'm a yellow disc. There are variations on it. They're based more on personality profiling than these root cognitive drivers, but not skipping all the science. What we try to do is say, look, this person, and we actually have a little assessment that new team members go through that we say, this person is going to have, one of these 4 orientations and really contribute to the team. And so we're not just looking at them sort of in isolation of, will they be a good team member? We're saying, how will they fit within our team? Which, again, everybody thinks about that, but this gives you like a binary means by which to assess that. And it's led us to bring in team members that have very unique backgrounds in many cases. And really those, I guess I'll put it this way, those that have been most successful here are those that really complement their team members versus duplicating. That's another place to use it.
I absolutely love that. It's when we do our meetings, you can tell someone may be a little bit more reluctant, but when they do speak up, everybody's kind of quiet because they're making a point, and so we have the people that are very analytical. We have the people that are, hey, what about this idea? And so it's in these 4 drivers. I'm so happy to learn about this because it's my brain is just switching right now. And it's kind of interesting how that's working as we're talking about this. It's making me think everything through a different lens.
Hey, I've had the same experience. I mean, I told you I got to this kind of point in my career where I was like, if I'm being honest, we're kind of making this up as we go and, using experience and intuition, and you kind of build a model. But it has been incredibly liberating and probably incredibly annoying at cocktail parties when, all questions are like, well, as a matter of fact, there are 4 drivers in what you're describing. But it is a really, I don't know, it gives you a lot of confidence and a lot of, it lets you, and that's another piece in terms of our culture, it lets you do your best thinking. And I'm a big proponent that, look, somebody who's been in the business 4 years probably I shouldn't hold them to the same standard as somebody who's been in 20 years. But what I hold myself accountable to is our framework should let each person do his best thinking. And so by having this model and saying, look, I've thought about this through these 4 lenses, it lets them have their best ideas. It brings the best out of them versus them doing what we call churning and going, where do I even start? So that it's been liberating for me too. And I'm glad to hear you say that.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. There's something to be said for structure in an environment. And me speaking from I hated structure. I was in corporate America for 12 years. It took me 11 years to get out. I mean, and when I did get out, my first client was the last company that I worked for. Like oh man, they used to call me JT for Jamie time. Because we'd have our Monday morning meetings, and we were supposed to be there at 7:30, and I'd show up at maybe 7:45 or 8. I could not stand these meetings. Luckily, I was doing my work and getting stuff done. I was producing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they would let me go. But it was to the point where it almost made me anti-structure, and I didn't realize how important structure was in an environment. But it's the way in which structure is delivered, in my opinion. And that's where you mentioned culture and really not being afraid of missteps or not being afraid of speaking up and because someone else, or being vulnerable because someone else may laugh or chuckle or roll their eyes. It's the environment. But I cannot believe how important structure is for us to be a good company and move forward and have really happy clients and do everything that you need to do.
Yeah.
Because I flew by the seat of my pants for years.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and I'm not trying to shrink you down here, but you probably have your default state is probably more that experiential, and I think that comes through in your career. You're very happy to explore and talk with people and collect ideas and follow your instincts. You meet people and talk through these things. They're not these scripted discussions. It's very natural. That's that very kind of purple mindset. And interestingly, you've created this business that brings a lot of blue, a lot of the rational practical via, a virtual assistant or just an assistant in. And it really is correlated to what Siggy talks to me about a lot, that, look, you can have, and he is a big thinker. I mean, he's a person that you can spend a lot of time, and he's talking about evolutionary biology and all kinds of really interesting things. And he always says, look, I need a charger. I need a blue with me to make sure the ideas get out there and are framed and are driven forward. It's kind of what you're describing. If you're always, there's nothing worse than when you're trying to get something done and moving through a meeting that's a real go do kind of meeting. And somebody's going, what if we did this? It's like, I would never want to squelch thinking like that. But what the structure does is it gives a time and a place. And people know that in a certain meeting, that's going to be rewarded. In a certain meeting, they'll have a negative experience if they do that. And likewise in your career, having that recognition to look, and a lot of business leaders are like that. They like to go and think and dream big, and they need someone to kind of be right along with them to go, okay, here's how we can go do it. Which one of these should we pursue? And be that charger mindset.
That's where you were talking about having people that work in complementary roles.
Exactly.
And experiences. My assistant Raina, she's the driver. Like she has the agenda. Okay. And she'll say, Jamie, we need to kind of move on. We need to get to this next, because I start going, and you nailed me. You nailed me in a heartbeat. and boy, she just comes right in, keeps it moving, keeps it going. And then she'll reach out, hey, did this get done? Did this get done? And she just gets those things rocking and rolling.
That's right.
And you nailed it. You're in this business for a reason.
Well, and hopefully we're getting better every day. And I mean, it's really just been the last few years that we really turned the lens on ourselves and said, look, an ideal team has kind of the purple like that, just what you described. There's probably also people that are the what we call the tribers, the people that help bring everybody along and help everybody feel included. And then there's probably people that often it's the sellers. Salespeople have a lot of that red, that persistence, ambition, aggression. That team working together. When you step back and look at really high functioning teams, oftentimes you can go, yep, there they are. It may not be 4 people, but those 4 drivers working in tandem is where you really get optimal outputs.
Yeah. So I would say, I'm probably 2, 3. Mm-hmm. What would you consider yourself?
They would, my team would say I'm a charger. I get very kind of rational and but I think where, when I'm being my most effective, I guess I'll say, is when I'm really transitioning between them and when I can effectively transition between them for tasks. So I think all of us have all four. I think when I'm really in the flow, I'm shifting between them really effectively. When I'm feeling stuck is when I'm stuck in one, or the work that we're doing sort of is pushing me into one, and I'm not kind of balancing back and forth. So you and anybody certainly shifts between them. And what Siggy would say, where the neuroscience team would say, is a really optimal, effective leader does all four, sort of with equal aplomb. But that's very difficult to do, and it's very contextual.
Yeah. Well, I'm thank you so much for sharing this. This is incredible, fantastic, and I hope a lot of people get a lot out of this. I sure as heck did, and I feel very selfish in saying that. But thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with me today. It's been incredible.
Well, thanks for the examples. I really enjoy applying the science, and you've been a real good collaborator in talking through it. So thank you too.
Oh my gosh, thanks, Hunter. Yeah. So how do people reach out to you? Number one, number two. And where are they when they should say, you know what, I really need to talk to Hunter about this? Like, where are they in their journey?
Yeah, look, we work across a range, and it's actually sort of a challenge in our business model because we're looking at human behavior at this really root level. It has a lot of application. So, in the example that you and I discussed, we were like, look, we're trying to test like how we should talk about ourselves. That's pretty activational. That's pretty far down the path. You were ready to put stuff out there and vet it. So they don't have to be way up at the front end. It can be down in the like, look, we're having trouble bringing this to life, a strategy that we have to life. Likewise, they can be, so I guess what I'd say is we get briefs that are like, how would you test, copy and content, kind of like you and I discussed. And we get, I have a lot of longstanding partners and clients that come and go, man, we're really dropping off with younger 18 to 24-year-olds. How would you figure that out? Like just a super vague question. Or, Walmart, how can we drive the shopper experience of the future? Very kind of big, vague question. So there's really no right place in the journey. I guess sort of the ideal engagement or interaction for us is when somebody is driving, a business or a brand and wanting to understand more fully, more holistically, and kind of ready to get on this journey, and organizationally their team is ready to take a little journey into a different way of looking at human behavior, as we would contend a much more accurate way of contending human behavior. But you got to be ready to zig where convention zags a little bit. So if you find yourself in that space, or a lot of times we'll have it where there's this story from years ago where and this goes way back, but a CMO took over an organization, and his first edict was no focus groups. And focus groups are sort of an old school thing anyway, but back then, that's all anybody did was focus groups. And everybody kind of went, oh, he told us what not to do, but what should we do? Somebody came and said, well, what would you do that wasn't a focus group? And that was, that was the beginning of one of our longest standing relationships. So when you find yourself in a spot where, you're ready for more, ready to understand more fully, that's what we do, I think, better than anybody.
Interesting. Yeah, that's so do you work with small, medium, and big business, or?
It ends up being larger companies for the most part. A lot of it is like big packaged goods companies, consumables and things. But we do a lot of pharmaceutical work. There's a lot in why there's all sorts of weird things in human behavior. Like, for example, why are there such compliance issues with medication? Why don't people take their medicine? Why don't surgeons wash their hands? There's all these weird things of like, makes no sense. And yet out in the world of behavior, it's happening. So, we look at applications across that. It's usually bigger companies, but I've done a lot of work with startups. The book you mentioned actually is called Brand Be Nimble, which I'm not trying to plug the book, but
plug away. Brand Be Nimble.
The whole thesis of the book was how big brands can thrive by innovating like startups. So I spent a lot of years counseling and advising startup companies. So I'm well familiar with the space, and I took those lessons because what was happening is huge companies were coming to us going, about startups, what's their secret? And startups were coming to me going, you work with huge companies, what's their secret? And I was like, hey gang, neither one of you has the answer, but there is these nimble principles that the startups use that can apply at big scale. And that's what I wrote about. Yeah, there it is. So anyway, point being, it's not a size of the company that matters. it's the situation they're in and the way they're trying to drive their business that makes it a good fit for us.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much. So it's Brand Be Nimble is the name of the book. That's exciting. Congratulations on becoming an author. And
oh yeah, that one actually goes back a few years.
Well, I'm going through the process now. My book comes out in September, so
cool.
I can appreciate. And I'm not a writer. Man, was that? Whew, that was tough. So
it is.
Congratulations.
The hardest part about the whole book thing is this sort of tension that once you write it, that's as good as it's going to be. Like you have this idea in your head and it's endless possibilities, but once those words are on the page, that's it. And at least for me, I struggled a lot with, is it as good as it can be? Is it its best?
That's what I'm going through.
Is it? Yeah, that was an interesting, unexpected part of the experience for me. That was.
Yeah, we just submitted to the copywriter, and they're very adamant, saying you can't change anything else once you submit. So make sure this is done. And I'm like, I'm stressed.
Okay, wait. I can do better. I can do better. Yeah,
wait, I have a really good idea. I could change it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's why you need Raina to go. Nope, this thing's going to get published if you keep. And there are authors that do that. They've been sitting working on a manuscript for a decade. It's like that's where you need someone to push you along. So
yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Well, what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
alpha-diver.com is our website, or Hunter at Alpha Diver, or we do put a fair amount of content on LinkedIn. That's kind of our main conduit of articles, posting things like this, other interviews or discussions we do. You hear from more of my team there. So depending on the nature of what you're interested in, those are the three best places to reach us.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I know we're getting towards the end of our time here, and I want to be respectful. So is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap today?
I don't think so. No, I mean, I think that this has exceeded my expectations, because I really didn't expect you to have so many live examples of like, oh my gosh, we just went through this. So I love working like that. I guess I'd say, for someone interested in working with us, this is the way, our interactions go. Very collaborative. We do our best work when somebody's pushing back, and I don't mean resisting. I mean, saying, hey, that reminds me of what we just did. So no, it's been a great conversation, and I really appreciate the discussion.
Oh man, Hunter, thank you so much. By the way, what a cool name, Hunter Thurman. Sounds like a pro football name or something. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. Do you have just a second for me to wrap up?
Sure thing.
Okay, bear with me 1 second. I'll wrap up. We've been having a wonderful conversation talking with Hunter Thurman. Hunter Thurman is the president of Alpha Diver, and you can go and learn more by going to alpha-diver.com. I can't recommend enough. Today's conversation, creating a model-based culture. We learned the difference between model-based and model-free. We also talked about the four different drivers of human behavior. Number one is rational or practical. Number two is tribal or social. Number three is experiential. What does that make you feel like? Number four is impulse, instinct. Kind of, what is the status like? Oh, how does it make, what are you looking like, kind of thing. So I cannot recommend enough. If you're in a position where you're kind of stuck and you need to figure out the why based on data, based on how this is going to make someone feel, or how you're going to socially impact others, anything like that, I cannot recommend enough reaching out to Hunter Thurman over at alpha-diver.com. Go check it out. Go buy his book. His book is on Amazon. It's called Brand Be Nimble, How Big Brands Can Thrive by Innovating Like Startups. Go check it out. I think anything that Hunter's doing, based on his experience and his team there, would be an incredible incentive to help you out. To get to that next level, to get unstuck based on neuroscience and data and just a lot of questions, different ways to think about things. I think it's really exciting. So big shout out to Hunter Thurman over at alpha-diver.com. Thank you so much for coming. If you're tuning into this and you want to see it later, you can go check out this and hundreds of other episodes on Live with Bottleneck. Learn how you can break through the bottleneck in your business today, and that's definitely something that Hunter can guide you through. And then I want to talk about coming soon to your earbuds, what to know before you decide to leave your position. I'm going to be talking with soulful leadership coach for women in business of Lead with Soul LLC. Her name is Kelly Reese. That's coming out Tuesday, July 13th. We're going to be live at 2 p.m. Central Time. So that's going to be a really fun conversation. And if you missed my conversation last Tuesday, this last past Tuesday on July 6th, I talked with Lori Wood. She's a certified divorce coach, a divorce specialist at Lori D. Wood. She talks about the emotional side of divorce, which is really, really a big thing right now with us coming on the back end of this whole COVID thing. With a lot of people working remotely, they experience new challenges. It's a really good episode if that's kind of the season or the time and place in your life right now. Highly encourage it. Lori is awesome. As I said, I'm writing a new book. This is not the cover. It's coming out pretty soon. Quit repeating yourself. And basically, it's all about culture, leadership, systems, processes, recruiting, and hiring. It's kind of open book on what we do here at Bottleneck, and I'm really happy to share with you. That's coming out in the beginning of September. So thank you so much for tuning in today. Remember, create your own ripple, and that's definitely going to help you stop the bottleneck in your business. Without any further ado, we'll go ahead and wrap up today. Thank you so much for joining both myself and our special guest, Hunter Thurman, with alpha-diver.com.